In this one, I'll be going through my process of creating this character right here. What is it? A person with a scarf, or maybe a bird? That's for you to decide. I won't be doing any sculpting or rigging in this one, just modeling with basic shapes and modifiers, and then some texturing. So it'll be beginner friendly as long as you know the basics. If you want to follow along with texturing, you can download the palette I'll be using for free from Gumroad. I have other stuff over there too if you want to look around. Links are in the description. Alright, let's get started. So here I am in Blender 2.93. This is my default scene that I always start with. It's just a camera parented to an empty and then a light. I have that in a separate collection, and I'm just going to hide that for now because we don't really need to worry about it. I'm going to add a second collection. You can hover over here and hit C, and this is going to be for our reference. So initially, how I came up with this character was I just sketched it out with pencil on paper, and I usually just leave my notebook next to my computer. So I looked at that back and forth while I was modeling and trying to adapt it to 3D. So if you want to follow along exactly, you can take a screenshot of the screen right here. So I'm just going to open up my references and I'm just going to drag them over here. You can just drag and drop them into Blender like that. And here's my side like that. So I'm just going to select those and hit Alt-G and Alt-R, and that's going to reset the location and rotation. I'm going to rotate both of those on the X by 90, and then just going to select this one, and I'm going to hit RZ 90 to rotate that 90 degrees on just the Z axis. And you can select both of them. And I want to scale these down so they're about 1 meter. So one of these squares right here is 1 unit or 1 meter in Blender. And I want this person to be pretty short, so I'm just going to try to line it up and get it kind of close to 1 meter, something like that. It doesn't have to be perfect, just, you know, close. And you can also change your image settings over here with this button down here. And if you change any of these, you have both of these selected, you can hold Alt. Say if I want to change the opacity of both of these, you can just hold Alt while you click this stuff, and it should affect both at the same time, like that. Otherwise, you're going to have to do this separately to both of them. If you want them to be in front, hold Alt and click both of these so they're in front of your model while you're modeling, but I'm just going to keep these both at their default right now. And also, if you don't want to be able to click them accidentally while you're modeling, you can just click this button right here, and that will make it so you can't select it. If you don't have this option already, there's this little filter button up here where you can change the different toggles and stuff. So I always have selectable, this one right here. All right, so now that we have our references, I'm gonna create a separate collection, and this is where we're going to start modeling. So to start, I'm just gonna add in a default cube with Shift A and go into front view with 1, and I'm going to add in a subdivision surface modifier. You can do that with Control 2 or just Control 1, 2, 3, 4, depending on how many subdivisions you want. So I'll do like Control 3, and now you can see that we have our modifier over here. You can hit Alt-Z to go into X-ray mode. You can also do that by clicking this button up here. And I'm just going to go into edit mode and start blocking out the body and trying to get it close. All right. And when you're doing this, it doesn't have to be exact. Just trying to get it pretty close. So I like to have X-ray on so that we can actually select through our object. Otherwise, it's not going to select those back points right there. So I'm just going to try to get it close. I'm going to scale it and hit Shift Z, and that's going to make it so it scales everywhere except for the Z axis. Just bring this pretty close to the body. All right, and I'm going to add a loop cut right here. This is going to be around where the head starts. That looks pretty close. And I'm going to bring another one down here so that I can make the bottom flare out a little like that. And you can see I'm hitting Alt-Z a lot, and that's basically just switching between X-ray and regular like that. All right, so I'll select these top ones now, and I'll just scale these down, try to give our head a little more of a point. I'll scale this out because you can see it's starting to slope inward now. I want it to be pretty wide still. We can check from the side by hitting 3 on our numpad. I'll just pull this back like that. And like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. We're actually going to be doing more modeling after this. We're just trying to get close, all right? So now that we have our base body, I'm gonna come over here, and I think I'll change this to maybe 2 subdivisions like that. And I'm actually going to apply this. But before I apply it, in case you wanna go back and edit this, you can just duplicate it like that with Shift D, and then you can just hide it over here. So we have that in case we wanna go back. So we can select this now and apply it. So now we have this nice smooth shape that we can work with. When we go into edit mode with tab, you can see I can move each individual vertex, which is kind of nice. I'm going to add another subdivision surface modifier to smooth this out with Control 2. So now we can go into edit mode, and before I start editing stuff, I'm actually going to hit Alt-Z to go into X-ray mode, and I'm going to delete half of these so that we can mirror it, and then we only have to edit 1/2. So now I can come over here and add in a mirror modifier like that, and you can see there's kind of like a seam going down the middle, and that's just because our mirror modifier is after our subdivision surface. If we switch it around, you can see the seam goes away. All right, so back in edit mode with tab, we can start pulling some of these vertices around. So move this one and create that little spot for the pointy part of the hood. Looks good. One of the reasons why I applied this is so we can make our face in here. So I'm just going to hit 3, and that's going to go into face select mode. You can also change what mode you're in up here for vertex, edge, and face select. And I'm just going to start selecting these. This is where I'm going to put my face. So I'll just hit I to inset. And if it's going in the middle like that, you can hit B. That stands for boundary, and it's going to make it snap to the middle when you do that. So I'll move in very slightly like that, and then we can hit E to extrude, and then Y to just go on the Y axis. And if you get these faces like that, that's because we don't have clipping turned on for our mirror modifier. So I'm going to Control Z to back out. You can see when we don't have clipping turned on, it lets us pull the faces apart. If we turn it on, it won't let us do that. And when we extrude it inward, we also won't get those faces in the middle. So that looks better now. So one thing that the subdivision surface modifier allows us to do is create areas that are sharper than others. So we can do that by hitting N, and you can see under item, we have this option called mean crease. And when I turn it up all the way, it sharpens all of the edges that we have selected. So I want to do that, but I don't want all of these interfaces. I just want like the loop around here. So I'm gonna go into edge select mode like that and hit Alt-Z so I can actually see these edges a little better. Now I'm gonna hit Alt and click, and that's just going to select the entire loop, but it looks like we have to do that for the sides and the top too. So you can hit Alt and Shift and then click to select multiple loops like that. And this just makes it quicker to select. So now that we have those selected, you can turn mean crease all the way up, and this is going to be our face right there, and it's nice and sharp. It looks like a separate object even though it's the same one. Now I'm going to hit 3 to go into face select mode, and I'm just going to pull this out so that our face has a little roundness to it, and that's looking pretty good now. So if you want your references to be on top, you got to turn selection back on. You can just select your image, come back over here to the settings and hit front like that. And this will help us model where we want the head to be and where we want, how we want it to be shaped. So I'm just going to make sure selection is turned off again so we can't accidentally select it. So back in edit mode, I'm just going to start pulling some things around. So you can see the hood, I want it to come out quite a bit more. So I'll just select this face and drag it out like that. Scale it on the Y axis a little. And you can just pull some of these around until you think they look good. I try to get these all to be like kind of smooth. I don't want them to be very different from each other and look like the flow is dirty. But luckily we don't have that many points, so it shouldn't be too hard. It's not bad. And we can look from the front, and I think I want it to be a little more smooth. And we can do that pretty easily. I just want to select this front edge, and you can shift click to select that edge right here too. Okay, and I'm going to pull this one down, make it a little thicker. If you want any of the sides to be thicker, if you think it looks too thin, you can just pull the outer edge slightly like that. Okay, I think this is looking pretty close to the reference. You can just turn on and off your collections just to check. So I think that's going to be it for our body, and we can just come over here, double click, and name this body, and give it a save. Oh, you know what? There's one more thing I would like to do, and I just want to create a little spot on the bottom that goes in so it looks like the bottom of a jacket. So with that selected, we can just extrude it upward, and I want that to go on the Z axis. Alt-Z to go into X-ray mode, and I'm just going to select this edge once again with Alt, Shift, and click, and we're just going to select this and make it sharp like we did for the face. And you can see when we do that, it's nice and sharp now. So this is going to be the bottom of her body. Okay, next we're going to work on this scarf right here. So this is an interesting method that I used. Basically, I'm going to create a cube right here with Shift A, and you can go into edit mode, and I'm just going to go into face select and delete the top face and the bottom face. So I'm going to select both of those, hit X, and delete faces like that. So it's just kind of hollow. And now I'm just going to line this up. So, select everything, scale it on the Z axis until you get it about as thick as you think it should be. Maybe like that. That looks pretty good. And then I'm going to scale it and hit Shift Z, and that's just going to move it on everything except the Z axis. So I'm just going to try to get this so that it's pretty close to our body. All right. So hit Tab to go back into object mode, and we're going to add a few modifiers. So go over to your modifier panel, and the first one we're going to add is a subdivision surface, and this is just going to smooth it out slightly. I'll turn that up to 2 maybe. Next, I'll add a shrink wrap, and right now it's not going to do anything because we need to select a target, which is just going to be our body right here. And you can see now it's kind of conforming to it, but I want to change this from on surface to outside, and we'll see what that does in a second. But first I want to add a solidify. This is going to give it some thickness, but you can see it's going inward and I want it to go out. So I'll just change the offset to 1 like that, and I'll change this to 0.03 to make it a little thicker. And I want to smooth this out again with another subdivision surface modifier. And we can just leave this at 1 for now. If we want to turn it up later, we totally can. So now let's take a look at what this shrink wrap modifier is doing when we set it to outside. So I'm going to go into edit mode right here. So when we scale this inward, you can see when it starts getting close to our body, it will conform like that. But if it's outside, it won't conform. It's basically only when it gets really close that it tries to stick to it like that. And so I like this so that we can kind of set up where we want our scarf to be and make some parts stick to our object and some parts flare out. And I'm just going to start lining this up and getting it close to our reference basically. So I'll just select everything and scale it in. That's looking pretty good so far. You want to make sure that it's not glitching at all. You can see if you bring it too close, it'll start to kind of cut through. It's okay for the top part to be pretty close to your model. And this just requires a lot of playing, just adjust it and try to get it to a point where you think it looks good. Okay, so now that I have this top one the way I want it, I'm just going to select everything. We're still in edit mode for this. Select everything and hit Shift D to duplicate. You can hit right click to bring it back to its original spot, and we can just pull it down slightly like that. And this is going to be our second layer. And now we can just kind of pull these around and make sure they're not clipping through each other and that they look good. One other thing that I did, you can see that I kind of tucked one of them under the other. And I thought this just made it look a little better. So it looked a little more like a real scarf instead of a bunch of rings, which is what it actually is. I'll take this one right here and I'm just going to drag it up like that. And you can take this other one from the top and drag it down slightly like that. And I want the top one to be above the bottom one, so I can just pull it out slightly like that. If you want, you could also take the bottom one. I'm just going to scale that on the Z-axis a little to make it a little thinner. That way it sits behind it nicely. All right, and now we just have to pull some of these points around so that they're not overlapping like this. And you can see I have the bottoms flaring out so they're not clipping into each other. And it's looking pretty good. But you can see our reference, we have these two scarf ends right here. So I'll make those next. So we can just make sure we're in edit mode for our scarf right here. And in edit mode, I'm going to hit Shift A and add in a plane like that. Hit R and X 90, and we can scale that down, bring back our reference. And I just want to make it about the same width as our reference right there. So this next part I like to use snapping. So I'm just going to go up here to the options and change it from increment to face, and make sure you have median selected. And I'm also going to turn on align rotation to target. So now when we hit G to move this around, you can hold Control and it will enable snapping like that. And you can see it's matching the direction of the surface that we're trying to snap it to like that. So this will let us just like line it up properly directly on our character's body like that. And now we can just take the top and pull it up slightly like that. You just want to make sure that it's not coming through your mesh too much. And I'm going to add a loop right here just so it's a little flatter at the end. And you might just have to pull this inward so that it conforms to the body. You can actually do that with both of these edges right there. And it's coming through our body now, so I'll just pull this down very slightly. We can just hover over our object and hit L. If you're in edge select, you want to make sure you're hovering over an edge like that. Now we can duplicate it with Shift D. And again, I'm going to hit Control to get snapping enabled like that. And I'll just put that right over here. And I just want to rotate this slightly so it's a little straighter. I want this one to be a little longer, just like in our reference. So I'll just pull these two edges down a little like that. I'll pull these two edges in just a little, and you can see they start to conform to our body a little better. I'm just going to pull this one up a little. I think I'll just change this one slightly. All right, so our scarf is done now, and we can just rename this scarf. Okay, so next we can make the shoes, which will be pretty easy. What I'll do is just hit Shift A to bring in a cube, and I'll add a subdivision surface modifier with Control 3. Then in edit mode, hit Tab, and just scale that down and get it pretty close to the same size as your leg. You can also pull this around and just line these up a little. So that's on the ground, and this will be up in the body very slightly. With this top face selected, I'm gonna turn the mean crease all the way up like that, just to make it sharp. So I'm gonna add a loop cut with Control R, pull this down slightly like that. And I'll just pull the front out, make this a little sharper, and I'll also pull the sides out slightly. Select both of the sides and hit Scale and X. Pull them out very slightly like that. And you can select the bottom face. And I'm going to turn mean crease up, but I don't want it to be completely sharp like that, so I'll just make it maybe around like 0.4. That seems good. Okay, so to mirror this onto the other side, we can just add a mirror modifier. And you can see it's coming over. And that's because our origin is still in the center. So if yours isn't mirroring correctly, you can just select the body as your mirror object like that, and it should work fine. So I'll just rename this feet like that and make sure that it's in the collection. So next we'll get started on the eyes, which should be pretty easy because we're just going to use UV spheres. And I'm just going to go into edit mode, make sure everything is selected, hit R, X, 90. And we can just line this up with our eye by hitting G, hit Control to snap it to the body like that. But I don't want it to be rotating all around like this, so I'm going to hit right click, and under snap settings, I'm going to turn off align rotation to target, so our eyes will always be looking straight ahead. So I'm just going to line this up now with the center of the eye, or pretty close, and I'm just going to scale this down. Hit Alt Z so we can actually see properly. And I'll just get this pretty close. Hit Control to snap it to your body right there too. Make sure it looks good from the side. That seems like it's in roughly the right spot, but it's coming through our scarf a little. So I'm actually just going to select our scarf and pull this top part out very slightly, like that. All right, so we can go back to our eye now and just select it. I'm still in object mode, and I can add a mirror modifier. And once again, I'm just gonna set the mirror object to be our body, like that. So if you want your origin point to be in the center of your eye so that when you rotate it, it actually rotates around where you would expect your eye to rotate, you can just right click on your eye, set origin to center of mass, like that. And now you can rotate it like up and down, stuff like that. And it'll still mirror properly because you have your mirror object set to the body. Rename this to eyes. You can go back into edit mode now. Make sure we're in vertex select and select this vertex right in the center. And I'm just gonna hit Control+ on the numpad to expand the selection like that. And I'm gonna do this until we have just half the sphere like that. And I'm gonna go back to face select mode right here. And I'm just going to Shift D to duplicate and hit right click so it goes back into place. And we can hit P to separate by selection. So we just duplicated that front part and turned it into a separate object. You can see we have this object right here now. And I'm just gonna rename this lids, and that's gonna be our eyelids right there. So we can rotate this 90 degrees, negative 90 degrees on the X, like that, so it's up top. And we can apply the rotation with Control A and rotation. So now our rotation is cleared, and this is just its natural state. And I'm just gonna add some modifiers. So I'll add a solidify, and we wanna change the offset to 1, so it's on the outside like that. And we'll add in a subdivision surface to smooth it out slightly. And if this looks too thick, you can either change the thickness of this or you can change the offset. So I'll just turn the offset down slightly so it's going into our eye a little bit. It doesn't look as like there's as much of a gap between the eye and the eyelid. And I'll just take the eyelid and rotate it just a little on the X. And if you think that the hood is cutting into the eye or the eyelid too much, feel free to go back and just pull this apart a little. So next we'll work on this nose right here. So to do that, I'm just gonna select the feet and I'm gonna duplicate them. And this is what we're going to use for our nose. I'm just gonna go into edit mode and delete everything with X like that. And I'm gonna Shift A to add in a cube. And I'll just scale that down. And I'm gonna turn clipping on for our mirror modifier and make sure our mirror modifier is at the top of the stack so we don't get that weird seam like we had before. Now you can see when I pull this apart at a certain point, it will snap together like that. And now I'm just gonna bring this into the center and I'm gonna hit Control so it snaps to the face. And if you want to turn the reference on to make sure that it looks the same, feel free to do that. Select everything and scale it on the X-axis so it's a little thinner. So what I want to do is just take this back face right here and make it sharp. So I'm going to select that and turn the mean crease all the way up like that. And I'm just going to pull it into our head very slightly. Okay, and if you want your nose to be a little more smooth and not as like flat in the front, you can just select the edges right here and pull them in slightly. And it looks like it still has that seam in the middle. So let's see what's going on. It's because we have a face on the inside right there. See that? So when we delete that, it should look fine. So we can continue to make this a little smoother by either pulling the sides in and down, or you can pull the front out like that. I'm going to add a loop cut with Control R in the center. And I'll just take this and pull it in like that, so it's a little more round. And I'll also do that right here. I'll bring this down so we have a nice little slope going on. In our reference, it slopes out a little like we have nostrils kind of. We can do that pretty easily. I'm just going to select this face right here, this one right here, and I'm gonna hit I to inset. And I'm just gonna make it, you know, maybe around this big. You can experiment with the size, and I'm just gonna pull it out slightly like that. And that's going to create a nice like nostril shape for us right there. And it looks like this edge was made sharp, so I can just turn that down like that and it'll be smooth again. And I got into this like isolation mode right here by hitting slash on the numpad. Select that and change the name to nose. Making eyebrows will be pretty easy. We can just do the same thing we did for the nose or for the feet. So I'll just select the feet again, duplicate it. Back in edit mode, gonna delete everything like that. Add in a plane with Shift A and rotate that on the X by 90 degrees. And I'm just gonna bring it up over here, and I'm using snapping with Control again. I'm just gonna scale that down. Scale that out on the X, and I'll add a loop cut in the middle with Control R, maybe around here, and pull it up slightly so we get that bend. And I'm gonna turn the subdivision surface modifier off for now. I'm gonna pull it out a little right there. And back in object mode, I'm going to reset the origin point. So I'm going to right click, set origin to center of mass right here. That way I can rotate it on the Y to get some angry eyebrows. And now we want to add some thickness to this. So I'm actually just going to delete the subdivision surface modifier right there. And I'm going to add in a solidify. I'm going to change the offset to 0 so it's right in the middle like that. And I'll just make this a little thicker. Now I'm going to add a subdivision surface after that. You can see it gets pretty round. I don't like how round it gets. So one thing we can do is add a bevel modifier and just make sure that is before the subdivision surface. What this is doing is adding a bevel right here. When we turn this down lower and it gets sharper like that, it will make the subdivision surface a little sharper. And we can even turn this up to 2 segments to get it even sharper. I'm going to turn the angle up so that we don't get these triangles over there. Okay, I think that's fine for the eyebrows. I'll just rename that brows. Now it looks like one of the only things left for modeling is the hair. So for the hair, we're going to use the skin modifier. So to get started, we're going to want a single vertex. So to do that, you can either add in a plane or a cube or something like that. Or if you go to preferences, add-ons, and type in extra and turn on extra mesh objects, it'll allow you to add in a single vert right here. And you can do add single vert, and it just adds it in the center and immediately puts you into edit mode right here. So I'm just going to switch over to vertex select so we can actually see our vertex. And I'm just going to hit G to grab this and Control to snap it to the face right here. And I'm just going to place it on the head right there. I'll look from the side and I'll just start extruding this outward like that. So now we can add a subdivision surface modifier to smooth this out a little, and I'll turn that up to 2. You can see it's a smooth line now. And I'll add the skin modifier now. And this is immediately going to look pretty broken. We have to go into edit mode. You want to select everything and you can hit Control A and that will scale it down like that, okay? You can also do that from the N side panel with these mean radius X and Y. You can just select both of them like that. And then after that, to smooth it out again, we can add another subdiv like that. So now we can just look at our reference and just get this looking similar. And if you look closely, you can see where the hair starts. So I'm just going to pull that part into the head, like maybe over here. And now it looks like it's actually coming out of the head. So I'm just going to select everything and scale it up a little more with Control A like that. And I'll just scale the tip down a little like that. So we can get started on our second piece of hair by just selecting these that we just made and duplicating it with Shift D. You can just move it over slightly and we can just compare it to our reference now. And you can see it's cutting through our hood a little. So we can just pull this part down slightly or move it over a little like that. You could also move this around, you know, just play with it. If it looks good, then it's good. I think that looks all right. I'm gonna go back into edit mode and just move our eyebrows down slightly like that. Either that, or you could make your hair less thick, you could move the hood, or you could just leave them clipping through each other if you think that looks good. I guess the only other thing I'd like to do is just make everything shaded smooth. So you can just hit A to select everything, right click and shade smooth. You can see that it didn't change the hair, and that's just a weird quirk with the skin modifier. If you go over here you have to turn on smooth shading like that. So I'm just going to give this a save, and we're going to start getting ready for texturing. So the first thing I'll do is go over to the shading tab right here, and we're going to add in a palette that I made. And I'm just going to add in a new material right here. And it's just going to immediately give you this principled BSDF, and that's fine. We're just going to build on top of this. What I'm going to do is add in an image texture. I'm hitting Shift A, S to search, and I'm just going to type in image like that. We have this image texture, and we can plug the color directly into the base color right here. I can hit Shift A and S to search and add in a texture coordinate right here. And I'm going to plug UV into vector like that. And so now we can open up the texture. If you want to download the palette that I'm using, you can get it for free on Gumroad. So I'm just going to open up that image now. If you want to add this material to all your objects, make sure you're selecting the object that this material is assigned to, and then you can hit A, so you can see that the hair is actively selected because it's yellow and the other ones are orange. So with all of them selected, hit Control L and link materials. And now you can see they all have this kind of crazy material going on. I want this to be sharper instead of blurry, so we can change this from linear to closest, and that will make it sharp now. And this is all we have to do to set up this texture. And we'll start assigning colors in the UV workspace. So we can just go over to UV editing right here. And you're just going to want to make sure you're in material preview over here. And I want to be able to see our palette over here. So we can just select this drop down and choose our palette that we loaded in. And you can zoom in on that. So now we can see our palette, and I'll show you how to start assigning things. I'm just going to select our body right here, okay? And I'm going to hit Tab to go into edit mode. And you can just hit A and select everything. I also like to have this sync button so that when we select something over here, it will also select it over here, and the other way around also. So we can just hit A to select everything. And then over here, you can hit G to move this around, and you can see it's moving the textures around over here also. What I like to do is select everything and then scale it down to 0. You can just hit 0. And now you have this single point, and you can move that around and it'll just change the color for you. Before we start doing this to everything, we have to set up a few of our objects. It looks like our hair mainly. When you use the skin modifier, it's technically just some edges, so there are no faces, and it doesn't really like to work with UVs very well. So we have to apply this, unfortunately. If you think you might want to edit it later, you can just duplicate this. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to apply the first and the second one right there. And we can leave this subdivision surface modifier right there. And then we have to go into edit mode like this, select everything, hit U, and unwrap. And now it should work fine. We can just come over here, make sure everything's selected, scale it down to 0. And now we can color it however we want, okay? So you can actually go into edit mode with multiple objects. So you can just hit A to select everything and hit Tab to go into edit mode. Hit A to select everything. And once again, I'm just going to scale all of these down over here to 0. So now everything should be a solid color, and we can actually start choosing our colors, okay? So I'm just going to make sure our body is selected now, and I'm going to hit slash on our numpad, and this will isolate it. So back in edit mode, I'm going to select our face right here. And for this, you can choose whatever colors you want, okay? And so now over here, this should be selected because we have sync turned on. You can just hit G, and you can see there's a little dot that's moving around, and you can just place that to wherever you want it, really. This person, I think I'm going to make their skin maybe teal or green. So I think down here is where I'm going to make the skin color. You can select everything else now, like that, and you can see we have 2 dots. So whatever one you want to select, you can just select it like that. You can just drag to make a box. And so now I'm only selecting things that are this color. I can drag this over. I'm going to make this a purple color, maybe like this color purple, okay? And now I'm going to hit slash again and bring everything back, and we can start doing this for our other objects. So I'll do our eyes first, because our eyes are mostly going to be white, which I think that is fine. I'm just going to select the middle vertex and hit Ctrl+ to expand the selection to about right here. And I can just move that to a different color, maybe like dark purple like that. And I think that looks pretty cool. I think maybe I want the pupils to be a little bigger. So I'll do that. And now I have these 2 dots, so I can just scale them down to 0 again, so they snap together. And I'll make that dark purple. I like big pupils for this character right here. So I'm just going to select everything again and go into edit mode, and we can start doing this for multiple objects. And if you're in face select mode right here, you can just hover over objects and hit L to select the whole object right there. So I want the eyelids. So I'm going to select our eyelids and just hit this button right here on the solidify, and that's going to make it easier to edit when you're in edit mode. So I want to select the nose and the eyelids right here, and I want these to be similar to the skin, but a little darker over here. This is our skin color right there. I want our eyebrows and our hair to be the same color, and I want those to be similar to the skin color, but maybe more vibrant and darker also, like that. I'm going to select our shoes. I want those to be similar to the jacket, but I want those to be darker, maybe the darkest purple up here. And I'll select the scarf now, like this. And I'll make it this light blue color, I think. So one thing I like about this method is how fast it is. You can see it really didn't take me long at all to set up the colors, and we're all using just one material for this. So if you did want to change the roughness or anything like that, you can either go back into the shading tab over here, or you can just, do that from the material properties right here. So if I wanted this to be like really shiny, I can just turn this down like that. Now it looks kind of like a porcelain doll or something like that. But I think this is good the way it is. So now I just went back to the layout area, and I'm very quickly just going to set up a stage and our camera and lights, and we're going to take a picture of this person. So I'm going to add in a plane right here, and I'm just going to make sure that's in the same collection as our camera and all that. And I'm just going to go into edit mode and scale this up pretty big. It doesn't really matter exactly how big, we can always change it later. Edge select mode to select this edge right here, extrude it on the Z axis right there, okay? And back in object mode, I'm going to add a bevel modifier, okay? And we can just change this to whatever size we want. We just don't want it cutting through our character, obviously. So I can make this pretty big and turn the segments up. I'll say it to maybe like 12 or something like that. And then we can right click and shade smooth. And if you can still see the lines right there, you can turn this up even higher. I'll change it to like 20. And now we can just set up our camera. So if you want some camera tips, I actually made a video all about camera tips and stuff like that. So you can go watch that if you want extras. But for this, I'm just going to set it up really quickly by moving this pivot point right here and scaling it to zoom. So I'm just going to reset the rotation so it's just looking straight ahead. And it'll look like that. And you can always move your stage slightly if you don't want to be able to see past it like that. So that's looking pretty good. We could also make this orthographic like that. And I'll change the camera angle very slightly. And I'm just going to shift it to the side like that. And now we can set up our lights. So for this, I'm just going to go into cycles. And I know my GPU is faster, so I'll turn that on. I'll also turn on optics denoising. I know that my graphics card is compatible. And I'm going to turn on persistent data also, even though we're just going to be rendering one image. So what I like to do is just change this to a 3D viewport, and we can hit 0 to look through the camera. And I'll just change this to render view so we can actually see what's going on. Now all we have to do is set up our lights. So you can see now, wow, really? So you can see now I just have 3 lights. They're all point lights. They're all slightly different sizes. If you make them bigger, the light becomes softer, and you can just do that with this radius option over here. And I have one back here that is slightly purple, just to give us some slight color in our scene right there. And if you want, you could also make the backdrop a different color by adding in a new material and just changing the color. You can change the roughness and do whatever you'd like. And then when you're ready to render, you can just go to render image up here, let it go, and you can just go to image and save as, and just save your image. And that's it. Alright, that's it for this one. I'm planning on doing more character modeling videos like this one, so if you enjoyed it, consider subscribing. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.